What you want from her is not luxury, not constant praise, not even perfection. You want emotional depth. You want a moment where the mask drops, where the performance stops, and something real stands before you. But this is precisely where the tension begins. A narcissistic personality is constructed around control. Control of image, control of perception, control of how others feel. Emotional depth, however, requires surrender. It requires the courage to be seen without armor. And that kind of exposure feels dangerous to someone whose identity is built on maintaining superiority. As Carl Jung often suggested, the persona we present to the world is a mask, necessary but fragile. When you ask for intimacy, you are not simply asking for affection, you are asking her to step beyond that mask. To you, vulnerability is connection. To her, vulnerability is risk. The more you ask her to share fears, admit insecurities, or reveal pain, the more she feels psychologically threatened. Not because you are wrong to want it, but because depth demands authenticity, and authenticity dissolves control. And when control begins to slip, resentment takes its place. If you truly seek depth, understand this. Never beg for vulnerability from someone who survives by hiding from it. What you want, at a very basic level, is accountability. You want her to say, "I was wrong." You want acknowledgement when she crosses a boundary. You want repair after conflict. In a healthy dynamic, this is not an attack, it is maturity. But to a narcissistic personality, accountability does not feel like growth. It feels like defeat. The narcissistic structure is built upon an internal hierarchy where she must remain superior. Admitting fault destabilizes that hierarchy. It forces her to confront imperfection, and imperfection threatens the grand image she has worked so carefully to construct. In the psychology of the ego, especially as explored by thinkers like Carl Jung, the shadow contains everything we refuse to see in ourselves. When you ask for accountability, you are indirectly asking her to face her shadow, and that confrontation is experienced as humiliation. Not mild discomfort, humiliation. The mind defends against that feeling with blame, projection, and reversal. Suddenly, you become the problem. Your reasonable request becomes criticism. Your desire for fairness becomes control. Understand this clearly. When someone cannot tolerate being wrong, they will eventually make you wrong for asking. So stop trying to extract responsibility from a person who experiences self-reflection as a threat to survival. What you want is consistency, not intensity, not dramatic highs followed by silence, but steady presence. You want words and actions to align. You want affection that does not disappear the moment you relax. In a psychologically healthy relationship, consistency builds safety. It tells the nervous system that love is not a threat. But for a narcissistic personality, inconsistency is not chaos, it is leverage. The unpredictability, the sudden warmth followed by distance, the subtle withdrawal after closeness, these are not accidents. They create emotional dependency. When approval is intermittent, it becomes addictive. You begin to chase what once came freely. From a deeper psychological perspective, control often hides beneath instability. As Carl Jung observed, what remains unconscious tends to control us. If her sense of power depends on keeping you slightly uncertain, then your request for consistency threatens that unconscious strategy. Stability removes the advantage. It levels the ground. And equality feels dangerous to someone who needs elevation to feel secure. So when you ask for clarity and steadiness, you are unknowingly asking her to surrender the very mechanism that keeps her feeling powerful. If you desire peace, stop negotiating with chaos. Choose stability, even if you must choose it alone. What you truly want is authentic love, not applause, not fascination, not the thrill of being chosen for a moment. You want mutual recognition. Two human beings meeting without hierarchy, without performance, without one standing above the other. Real love requires equality. It requires the ability to say, I see you, and to allow yourself to be seen in return. But admiration is different from love. Admiration places one person on a pedestal and the other below. For a narcissistic personality, admiration feels safe because it preserves superiority. It keeps the structure intact. Love, however, levels the ground, and equality can feel like erosion to someone whose identity depends on elevation. When you stop idolizing and start relating as an equal, something shifts. You begin to speak honestly. You set limits. You no longer overpraise or overextend. In that moment, she may experience not connection, but loss. The supply of admiration weakens. The pedestal begins to crack. As thinkers like Carl Jung understood, the ego resists anything that threatens its inflated image. Your move toward equality can be perceived as betrayal. Understand this clearly if your love requires equality and her identity requires superiority. One of those structures will collapse. Choose the structure that allows you to remain whole. At some point, beneath all the conflict and confusion, what you really want is simply you want to be seen, not as a function, not as a source of validation, not as an accessory to someone else's story. You want your feelings to matter, your struggles to be acknowledged, your inner world to be recognized as real. But in the psychology of narcissism, other people are often experienced less as independent beings and more as reflections. They are mirrors, mirrors that confirm beauty, intelligence, desirability, power. When you are playing that role, things may feel smooth. You are appreciated, as long as you reflect what she wants to see. The tension begins the moment you step out of the mirror. When you express needs that disrupt her image, when you reveal pain that she did not cause, but also cannot center herself within, when you assert an identity separate from her narrative, something shifts. Your humanity competes with her self-focus, and to someone organized around maintaining a grand self-image, that competition can feel threatening. As suggested in the depth psychology of Carl Jung, true relationship requires encountering the other as thou, not as an extension of the self. If you want to be truly seen, stop shrinking yourself to remain someone else's reflection. And finally, what you want is truth, not fragments of it, not a version carefully edited to protect pride. You want transparency. You want reality to be solid beneath your feet. Because without truth, there can be no trust, and without trust, there can be no intimacy. But illusion is often the psychological armor of narcissism. The image must be maintained. The narrative must remain intact. Contradictions are denied. Histories are revised. Motives are reframed. It is not always deliberate deception in a calculated sense. Often it is self-deception first. The mind protects the ego from collapse by reshaping reality. When you begin asking direct questions, When you calmly point out inconsistencies, when you refuse to participate in distortion, you are doing something far more disruptive than arguing. You are challenging the illusion itself. And illusion, once threatened, fights back. As depth psychology reminds us, particularly in the work of Jung, the confrontation with truth can feel like a symbolic death of the false self. Not everyone is ready for that death. So understand this. If someone must distort reality to preserve their identity, your commitment to truth will feel like betrayal. Stand in truth anyway. Because peace built on illusion will always demand that you sacrifice yourself.